I was reborn on an afternoon when I was 15. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cigars and old books, a smell unique to my father, Richard Blackwood's study. He had just finished a transnational video conference, his silver-gray suit impeccably tailored. He sat meticulously behind the massive mahogany desk, on which lay a single document. Beside him was his personal lawyer, David, an Ivy League graduate. I stood in the center of the rug, just back from my equestrian lesson, my riding breeches still flecked with bits of grass, my hair messily tied back. On this stage of power built for adults, I looked like an out-of-place prop. Clara. My father's voice was gentle and steady, yet carried an authority that permitted no argument. Your mother has been emotionally unstable lately. You know she needs to rest. He used the phrase emotionally unstable, like a velvet curtain, softly concealing the hysterical arguments, the shattered antique vases, and my mother's stifled sobs in the dead of night. We have two options for you, he said, steepling his fingers, his calm gaze landing on me. You can stay in New York and continue to keep her company. Or you can go to Switzerland and enroll in Rosea Academy. The environment there will be more conducive to your development. After you graduate, a portion of the Blackwood Group's shares will be your coming-of-age gift, allowing you to participate in management early on. He spoke with the sincerity of an enlightened father, who truly had his daughter's best interests at heart. Of course, to ensure your life abroad is worry-free. He nodded slightly, and David at his side pushed the document in front of me. We have established a $20 million trust fund for you, to be managed entirely at your discretion. In my past life standing here, I had been completely crushed by fear and sorrow. $20 million, an astronomical sum. But back then I had only one thought. My family couldn't fall apart. I couldn't lose my mother. On the living room sofa, my mother, Eleanor, sat silently in her favorite Chanel tweed suit, her red-rimmed eyes betraying her forced elegance. I had run over, crying, and torn that cold agreement to shreds. The pieces fluttered down before my father's polished leather shoes like wounded butterflies. I want my mom. I had shrieked, my voice hoarse with desperation. I thought my devotion and love had won the battle. Looking back now, it was the most foolish victory of my life. That year I naively chose to stay. And the result? In less than half a year, my father sent me to Europe anyway, under the pretext of broadening my international perspective and cultivating a future heir. But the destination wasn't a top Swiss academy. It was the London mansion of his paramour, Sophia Vance, a female executive at the company. I became the most awkward presence in that house, a rootless guest. Eventually, even her housekeeper could order me around. Sophia's fraternal twins, who looked as harmless as angels, were in fact my father's illegitimate children, and they had inherited all of his shrewdness and indifference. I had genuinely treated them as my younger brother and sister, only to watch them, at the reading of my father's will, take everything that should have belonged to my mother and me as his heirs. And me? In the end, no one remembered that I was the Blackwood family's only legitimate eldest daughter. My mother, Eleanor, remained alone in that vast empty old house in New York. She desperately studied business law and contacted lawyers, trying to get me back from London. She thought she was still Richard Blackwood's lawful wife, that she still had the right to negotiate. Until one day, a letter from a lawyer arrived, informing her that the title of the property that held her entire youth was about to be transferred. She refused to leave. She sat in that empty living room like a slowly weathering statue, eating cold takeout, and told me over the phone, "I'm waiting for Clara to come home." Later, I heard her choke on water over the phone as she swallowed her pills, and only then did I learn that her depression had become so severe she couldn't sleep through the night. When I graduated from college at 20, my first job was washing dishes in a restaurant in London's Chinatown. My second was walking a rich family's ill-tempered purebred hound. The day my mother was committed to a mental health facility, I was handing out flyers for a gym at a tube station entrance. A doctor called me from New York. His voice was grave. "Mrs. Blackwood attempted to jump from the window 3 times last night, but without Mr. Blackwood's authorization, we cannot proceed with compulsory intervention treatment." I stood on a bustling London street, the phone pressed tightly to my ear, but my entire world had fallen silent. I couldn't say a word. The last time I saw her was 5 minutes before the memorial service. She lay there quietly, unable to hear me call her mom ever again. It was only then that I truly understood. She hadn't lost to Richard nor to Sophia. She had lost to me. The daughter she had spent her whole life trying to protect was so weak, she couldn't even afford a plane ticket home. This life, that fate-defining agreement lay before me once again. I didn't cry. I simply took the Montblanc pen David handed me and, at the bottom of the document, signed my name in clear, steady strokes. Clara Blackwood. My father's eyebrows raised slightly, as if he were truly seeing his daughter for the first time. Have you thought this through? Perfectly clear. I met his gaze directly, my tone possessing a composure well beyond my years. As your only legitimate child, it's true that I should gain some experience in the world to better shoulder my future responsibilities. I enunciated the words only and legitimate with particular clarity. He paused for 2 seconds, then let out a low chuckle. As expected of my daughter, you have vision. I smiled too, a smile clearer and crueler than his. He thought I had finally seen the light, that I had become sensible and obedient. But I knew perfectly well that sending me to distant Switzerland was merely a way to create time and space for his illegitimate children in London, allowing them to grow accustomed to their father's role and cultivate a so-called heirs bond. By getting me out of the way, he could more smoothly and respectably shed the constraints of the Mrs. Blackwood title and install his Sophia in her rightful place. Unfortunately, my poor mother would never understand. She was still living in the romantic fairy tale she had woven for herself, believing that Richard would one day have a change of heart. She didn't know that the moment I signed that agreement, she and I had been ruthlessly kicked out of the game called the Blackwood family. That night, I returned to my room and closed the door. The moonlight outside was as cold as ice. I didn't shed a single tear. I just opened my laptop and logged into the newly activated Swiss bank account linked to my black card. The long string of zeros on the screen clearly displayed a balance of $20 million. I stared at it for a full minute, then pulled open my desk drawer and took out a brand new leather-bound notebook. On the first page I wrote in English, Richard's illegitimate children. Leo Vance, Lily Vance. Place of birth, London. Structure of Richard's offshore trust accounts. To be investigated. Status of Mother Eleanor's prenuptial assets and dowry company shares. To be investigated. Ultimate goal. Within 4 years, take back everything that belongs to my mother, Eleanor, and me. I pulled up a photo of my mother on my phone. She was young, smiling brightly in Central Park, wearing a Burberry trench coat that was a decade out of style, her eyes full of naive happiness. She later gave that coat to our maid, saying the woman's family was struggling. Later, I saw it in a trash can in the backyard, stained with cake frosting and muddy footprints. This life, I will not trust in the warmth of human kindness again. It's not that I've become cold and heartless, but that I've finally seen the truth. In this gilded home, no one ever truly cherished my mother or me. From this day forward, I, Clara Blackwood, will use these $20 million as my foundation to upend the rotten chessboard of the Blackwood family, piece by piece, until it is utterly overturned. The night I signed the papers, the darkness outside was deep, but the crystal chandelier in the living room stayed on all night. As I started up the winding staircase to the second floor, I glanced back and saw my mother, Eleanor, still sitting on the cream-colored sofa. Her eyes were as red as peeled lychees, and she was clutching a music box I'd had as a child. It was a gift from my father on my 5th birthday, with my name engraved on it. Clara. She seemed to want to say something to me, but her lips moved and then fell silent. She lowered her head, as if in a daze, or perhaps engaged in a silent act of self-persuasion. I said nothing and turned back to my room. The door closed softly, shutting out the light and the sorrow from downstairs. My ears were suddenly quiet, but my heart was like a trapped drummer, pounding wildly in my chest. I lay in bed and counted 500 sheep with my eyes closed. The moon outside didn't move an inch, and she too didn't sleep a wink all night. I heard faint rustling from her room, the soft click of a pill bottle being opened, the dull thud of a glass bumping against the corner of a table, and a murmur almost swallowed by the air. She's changed. Of course, she had no idea that what I had changed was an entire lifetime of regret and tears. At 2 in the morning, I quietly went downstairs. She was still in the same position on the sofa, curled up against a silk throw pillow, her eyes open and vacant, like an exquisite doll that had been powered down. I walked over, picked up a thin cashmere blanket from the arm of the sofa, and gently draped it over her. Like a startled bird, she flinched slightly and slowly raised her head. "You're still awake?" Her voice was hoarse, like an echo lost in the Sahara Desert. "I was writing my application for the school in Switzerland," I said after a pause, fabricating a plausible lie. She nodded silently. I looked at her, and she looked back at me, as if searching my face for the slightest hint of wavering, the slightest trace of hesitation. But I gave her none. The faint hope in her eyes, like the last flicker of a candle in the wind, was extinguished bit by bit. She asked in a strained voice, "Are you blaming me?" "No," I said. She forced a smile that was uglier than a sob. "Richard didn't just give you this money out of the blue. He doesn't want to send you abroad to study, he wants to send you away." "I know." She snapped her head up to look at me, her eyes frighteningly bright. "Then why did you still sign it?" I didn't answer. Because I couldn't explain it to her. Couldn't explain that I had already lived through her devastating defeat once before. Couldn't explain that if I didn't leave, an inescapable abyss awaited us. She clutched the copy of the agreement, and a single tear splattered onto the paper. The sound was like a nail pinning me to the spot. "It's not that I didn't try," she murmured, as if explaining to me, or perhaps passing judgment on herself. I fought with everything I had to hold this family together, but he never intended to let me win." In that moment I desperately wanted to run over and hold her, to tell her that this time in this life I would protect her like a rock. But I didn't move. I just watched as she slowly curled back into the sofa, wiping away her tears messily with the back of her hand and biting her lip so hard she looked like a little girl abandoned by the entire world. My chest felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, aching with a tight pain. But I couldn't afford to be soft. I knew that in my past life, it was a hug on this very night that had plunged me back into an emotional quagmire. I was led astray by her sorrow and weakness, and the result was her leaping from the top of a sanatorium, while I had to scrape together enough money for a plane ticket back to New York by working odd jobs. This time I absolutely could not give in. I turned and walked step by step back to my room. At 4:30 in the morning, she finally drifted into a deep sleep on the sofa. But I felt no trace of drowsiness. I opened my email and began meticulously preparing all the documents for going abroad. The school transfer application, visa materials, the plan for the first transfer of funds from the trust before the freeze period, and the Plan B list my mother would never know about. A list of executives at the Blackwood Group's European branches, along with their background checks. Records of all real estate transfers under Richard Blackwood's name. Potential legal loopholes in the group's major contracts from the last 5 years. The Swiss private bank account manager in charge of the Blackwood family's offshore trust. And a memorandum on the future heirs development plan. First on the list, Leo Vance, age 5, future attendee of a top-tier preparatory school for the aristocracy in London. I gently bit the end of my stylus and with the red digital pen, circled the name Leo 3 times heavily. Leo Vance. How ironic. The thought of how, years from now, all the major financial news outlets would be splashing stories about the renowned Blackwood Group's sole heir being a brilliant young prodigy, while the public selectively ignored his status as an illegitimate son, made me physically ill. In my past life I watched him join the group, sign his first contract, lead his first project, and be hailed by the media as a business prodigy. This life, if he wants to walk that path, he'll have to get a pass from me first. At 7 in the morning my mother woke up. Her eyes were puffy, and her face was sallow like a crumpled piece of parchment. I had finished washing up and was about to head out to handle some pre-departure paperwork when she blocked my way at the door. "Clara," she called out, her voice holding a barely perceptible tremor. "It's not too late to change your mind." I stopped and turned back to her. "Not this time," I said. "I'm going out there to win, and then I'm bringing you home." She stared at me, her gaze fixed, for a very long time. Finally she nodded. Not a single tear fell. She only said, "Then don't you lose." I smiled. "Don't worry. I won't." I closed the door and walked out of the heavy carved gates of the Blackwood estate. In that moment the New York sun was bright, the sky was blue, and the wind carried the crisp chill of early spring. The day we went to the airport, Richard drove himself. My mother, Eleanor, sat in the passenger seat, silent. She had spent a full 3 hours on her makeup. Her lipstick was her favorite, Dior $9.99, and the foundation was a bit thick, but it still couldn't hide a bloodless pallor. She kept her head turned to the window, watching the road to JFK Airport, a road she could have driven with her eyes closed, as if trying to seal her entire life within the receding scenery. Richard wore a slightly worn, navy blue Ralph Lauren suit. His smile was pleasant, his demeanor gentlemanly. To an outsider, he was the perfect husband and a loving father. He gripped the steering wheel, chatting with me in a light tone about amusing stories from my school in Switzerland, then turned to my mother. I've already made the arrangements. Sophia will look after Clara in Europe. I feel at ease with her in Sophia's care. My mother didn't respond. She only clutched her Hermes handbag, her knuckles white from the force. Of course she knew who Sophia was. The youngest, most brilliant female executive at the corporation. 35 years old, dual degrees from Wharton, beautiful and ruthless. Most importantly, 5 years ago in London, she had given birth to a pair of fraternal twins for Richard Blackwood. On the Blackwood Group's board of directors, some even privately called her the Shadow Queen. It wasn't that my mother didn't know. She had just been pretending not to. Just like today, she was still wearing her most expensive champagne gold dress, said to be the first luxury item my father had ever given her, back when his career was just getting started. She sat in the passenger seat, her spine ramrod straight. If she was going to send me off, she would do it as a true, unimpeachable Mrs. Blackwood. Even if, after I was gone, she would become just another woman forgotten by history. At the airport, my father's driver was already waiting at the VIP entrance. He respectfully took my luggage. My mother grasped my hand, her fingertips ice cold, and asked softly, "Do you have your passport? Your stomach medicine? Don't forget that cashmere scarf." I nodded, watching as the rims of her eyes gradually turned red. She tried to force a smile, but the corners of her mouth refused to turn up. Her voice was tight, tinged with tears. "If it gets too cold over there, video call me. I'll ship you some clothes." My own eyes started to burn, but I held back my tears. This wasn't a farewell. This was a deployment for battle. My father stepped forward and, in a protective gesture, gently put his arm around her shoulder. Then he smiled at me. "Your mother is such a worrier. She hasn't been sleeping well these past few days, worrying about you." A shock went through my mother. The suggestive phrase "your mother" had clearly left her dazed. Her eyes actually welled up, as if in that instant she was reliving the illusion of being loved. I looked at her, my heart aching with a mix of anger and pity. This was my mother, Eleanor. Even knowing she'd been utterly betrayed, she still tried to piece together some pathetic sense of security from that tiny scrap of false affection. Perhaps it was because she had spent her entire youth by this man's side, accompanying him on his journey from nothing to an empire. I stood up, ready to walk to the security checkpoint. Just then my mother suddenly hugged me tight. "Clara." She buried her face in my shoulder, her voice trembling uncontrollably. "If you're not happy over there, just come home. Mom will always be here." I patted her back gently. "Mom, wait for me." "Wait for you to do what?" "Wait for me to come back and take back everything that should be yours," I whispered in her ear, in a voice only the two of us could hear. She froze, her eyes vacant for a moment. Then she nodded firmly. "Okay. Mom will wait for you." I took one last look back and saw my father still holding her. The scene looked like a loving old couple saying a final goodbye to their daughter. Only I knew that locked in his office drawer was a photo of Sophia and their 2 children at Disneyland, his smile more genuine than in any of our family photos. And only I knew that this wouldn't stop him, one day, from leaving the entire family fortune to those children he had on the side. Without a second thought, I walked into the VIP lounge. Sophia Vance was sitting on a sofa, waiting for me. She wore a well-tailored camel trench coat, her makeup was flawless, her lipstick a cool-toned berry shade, and on her ears were Van Cleef & Arpels 4-leaf clover earrings. My father had certainly invested a lot in her. She stood up and extended a hand with a smile. "Clara, it's a pleasure to see you again. Richard has told me so much about you." I didn't shake her hand, only gave a polite nod. Thank you for this. She didn't seem to mind at all, smoothly withdrawing her hand and picking up her handbag from beside her. It's no trouble. From now on in Europe, just think of me as family. You can tell me anything. I smiled but said nothing. She thought I was the same naive, timid 15-year-old girl who knew nothing of the adult world. In my previous life, I lived in her London home for 4 years. I knew which drawer held the children's birth certificates, which safe held their passports, how many nannies she'd gone through, and what time late at night she liked to call Richard to report on my state of mind. I knew it all. She thought I knew nothing. She didn't know I was back to settle the score. Sophia led me onto the private jet. The seats were spacious and comfortable, and a flight attendant respectfully offered me champagne. It all felt like a carefully orchestrated fairy tale. After I sat down, I didn't say another word. I just inserted the new European SIM card into my phone, enabled location services, data, and recording permissions. In the background, I also linked my financial accounts to text message verification. I knew that this departure meant saying a final goodbye to the comfortable life under the halo of being the eldest Blackwood daughter. They could now groom their future crown prince in London with peace of mind. But they would soon find out. I was not an exiled princess. I was a creditor back to collect. The plane landed in Geneva at 5 in the morning. The sky hadn't fully lightened, and outside the cabin window was a quiet, deep Prussian blue. I grabbed my suitcase and followed Sophia off the plane. Her smile was gentle, her steps light. She was playing the part of the impeccable guardian. Clara, you must not have slept much on the plane. Let's get some breakfast first. Do you want something Chinese or Western? She asked with an air of intimacy, as if I were truly a beloved niece. I gave a faint smile, maintaining a polite distance. Either is fine. Thank you, Miss Vance. An imperceptible flash of surprise crossed her eyes, as if she hadn't expected me to be so calm and formal. She didn't know that Ms. Vance was a title I had spent 4 years suppressing the urge to defy in my past life. It was also the first chip I would play to collect on my debt in this one. The car was her own, a black Porsche Cayenne. The interior was spotless, and in the trunk, she already had a new toiletry bag, a school brochure, and a detailed city guide waiting for me. I got in and the window rolled up, sealing off the outside world. Sophia talked the entire way, asking what color room I liked, if I needed a private tutor, whether I was interested in learning to ski, ride horses, or play golf. Her words were flawless. Every sentence crafted to sound like she had my best interests at heart. Too bad I didn't believe a single one. She'd say things like, "You should think of my home as your own," but her real home, her real children, were sound asleep in the nursery of her villa on the shores of Lake Geneva. The door to that room had their custom-made English names on it, and inside were thousands of dollars worth of Legos and original edition picture books. They were fraternal twins, a boy and a girl, the surprise Sophia had secretly given birth to in London for Richard's 45th birthday. They were only 5 now, old enough not to disturb my studies, young enough to be kept off social media, and most importantly, their existence was a secret from my mother, Eleanor. Sophia was an extremely clever woman. She knew Richard's divorce wasn't finalized, and she knew Eleanor still held founding shares in the Blackwood Group and voting rights on the board. So she kept herself and her children well hidden, hiding their existence, hiding her ambition, and hiding her desire for her son to one day inherit the entire Blackwood empire. And I was now just a pawn in her grand scheme, a smokescreen to distract from the truth. She knew I had excellent grades and an introverted personality, which made me seem easy to control. Placing me in Switzerland was a way to show Richard her generosity, while keeping me under her direct supervision. Your father says you have high emotional intelligence, not like some kids who are just book smart, she said with a smile, sizing me up from the corner of her eye. I'll be honest with you. He actually thinks very highly of you. I smiled, playing along with her act. Is that so? I never knew. She paused, then continued in an even softer tone. Don't overthink it. Your father, he's just not good at expressing his feelings. You know how men are, always focused on their careers. You just focus on your studies for now. Once he's settled things at home, what's yours will be yours. You won't miss out on a thing. After all, you're his only daughter. I nodded, putting on an expression of gratitude and trust. Thank you, Miss Vance. I'll be sure to follow your arrangements from now on. Her features relaxed, as if she'd let her guard down completely. Such a good girl. I lowered my gaze, my nails digging deep into my palms. In my last life I was good just like this. I lived in her house for 4 years like a shadow, silent and invisible. Every year, she would throw a birthday party for me, inviting the children of my father's business partners. Her own daughter, Lily, was always among them. The little girl looked so much like Richard. At 3 years old, she could sweetly call me big sister. But her eyes held no affection, only a childish, scrutinizing coldness. She was just mimicking the adult's attitude toward me, this superfluous sister. And by then my mother, Eleanor, had already been committed to a mental institution, chanting my name day after day. In this life I would not be that obedient girl who could be pushed around anymore. But on the surface I would act more obedient than anyone. Sophia's villa in Geneva was decorated like a showroom from an interior design magazine. Even the dinnerware was a limited edition Hermès collection. She put me in a guest room on the 2nd floor, with a window overlooking the shimmering waters of Lake Geneva. Everything in the room was brand new. There was even a card on the desk with "Welcome, Clara" written in calligraphy, the perfect finishing touch to a meticulously planned reception. When I came out of the shower, I saw she had already organized all my materials for school tomorrow, and had thoughtfully printed out a campus map and class schedule. "You should get some rest and adjust to the time difference. I'll drive you to school tomorrow. Someone should be with you on your first day," she said softly. I nodded. "Thank you, Miss Vance." She smiled satisfied. At 11 o'clock, the light in her room went out right on schedule. I, however, was sitting at the desk in my room. I opened the encrypted laptop I'd brought with me, and began to sync the fragmented memories from my past life with the revenge plot I was laying out for this one. I stared at the screen, at the intricate webs of personal connections and diagrams of financial flows, until the moon rose outside, casting a cold, clear light on the lake's surface. This life, I wasn't here to live under someone else's roof. I was here to tear down the world they ruled. The next morning at 6:30 sharp, Sophia knocked on my door. I was already awake. "Clara, it's time to get up. Breakfast is ready." Her voice was as gentle as if she were coaxing a frightened kitten. I sat up in bed and opened the door, a perfectly calibrated sleepiness on my face. "Good morning, Miss Vance." She paused, likely surprised that I could get into character so quickly. "Such a good girl," she said with a smile. "Come downstairs for breakfast. I'll take you to school in a bit." On the dining table was warm milk, golden brown toast, organic cereal, and a fruit salad cut with the precision of a work of art. I had just sat down when a small figure in a pink princess dress ran out from the living room. "Mommy, hug." The little girl dove into Sophia's arms, her voice sickeningly sweet. I looked over. She had soft, curly blonde hair, and you could already see a hint of Richard in her features. She looked up, saw me, and immediately fell silent. Her big, sapphire blue eyes darted over me as she whispered, "Mommy, who is she?" Sophia stroked her hair, her tone gentle. "Lily, this is your sister." "Sister?" The little girl tilted her head, looking at me curiously. "But you don't look like me." I looked down, gave her a gentle smile and said softly, "That's because my mommy and daddy are different from yours." She chewed on her straw and nodded, as if she half understood. Only I caught the fleeting stiffness in Sophia's eyes. Just then a little boy came down the stairs. He was wearing blue Superman pajamas and clutching a huge Lego robot. He didn't speak, just stood on the steps, watching me with a wary, scrutinizing gaze, like a small animal defending its territory. I smiled at him. "Good morning, Leo." He ignored me, hugging the robot in his arms even tighter, as if making a silent declaration of his claim. Sophia explained a bit awkwardly, "They're a little shy around new people. Please don't mind." "It's all right, we'll take it slow," I said with a smile, appearing gracious and understanding. "They're just kids after all." I spooned up some cereal, lowered my head to take a bite, and perfectly concealed the storm brewing in my eyes. This Miss Sophia wasn't being particularly subtle. I couldn't tell if she truly thought I was that naive, or if she simply held the daughter of a loser in contempt. Both children had taken her surname, and the official story was that their father worked abroad year-round. In my past life I ate breakfast in this same bizarre atmosphere, watching one of them affectionately call her mommy, while the other shut me out with a cold stare. For years, I went from being their sister in name only to the Blackwood family's unmentionable exile, then to an irrelevant guest. In the end, I wasn't even a guest anymore. My university enrollment was inexplicably cancelled, and even my visa application to return to my home country had to be approved by their lawyers. Not this life. This life, I will make them hand over their own futures to me with their own two hands. Before Sophia drove me to school, she made a point of pulling the two children to her. "Come on, say goodbye to your sister." "Bye-bye, sister," Lily chirped, waving her little hand. Leo, however, just grunted reluctantly. I looked back at them, smiled and nodded. "Goodbye, my dear little brother and sister." That dear was for them, but it was also for Sophia. I knew she was smart and perceptive. She would notice my every glance, every word, even every subtle movement. So I had to play the part of a harmless sister, desperate for a warm family, even better than she played her own. When she dropped me off at the entrance to Rosia Academy, she helped me with my backpack and began her meticulous instructions. "Eat in the school cafeteria for lunch, and remember to drink plenty of water. The climate in Switzerland is very dry. If anything happens, call me anytime." I looked at the perfectly measured tenderness in her eyes, gave her a flawless smile and thought, she's a natural-born actress. I pretended to listen intently. "I'll remember, Ms. Vance." "Thank you." She nodded, satisfied. Before I walked through the gates that symbolized Europe's most elite education, my backpack on, she said one last thing. Her voice was low, spoken almost directly into my ear. "Clara, you must remember when you're abroad, there's no one to hold an umbrella for you. You have to learn to rely on yourself." My steps faltered for a moment, then I smiled faintly. "Yes, I understand." I walked onto campus, the bright sunlight making me squint. Ahead of me were new classmates, new teachers, a new class schedule, and a new chess game of my own making. But I felt no fear. I didn't come here to take shelter from the rain. I came here to lay the mines. When school let out at noon, I didn't go straight back to Sophia's villa. Instead, I went to a cafe in downtown Geneva. There, I met someone I had contacted beforehand via encrypted email. A man who, in my past life, had been a financial advisor for the Blackwood Group's European division. "Are you saying there's a problem with the accounts for the Blackwood Group's mining acquisition in the Americas?" I asked in a low voice. He nodded, his eyes shifting away. "I don't want any trouble. I just followed orders and changed the dates and amounts on 2 invoices. It was definitely a channel for money laundering, but I can't say who gave the order." I took a business card from my bag and slid it in front of him. It bore the logo of the top headhunting firm he would approach for a job in 3 years. "I know who you'll be sending your resume to in the future, and I know which accounting firm you'll intern at after graduation. Whether or not you get that offer depends on how much truth you tell me today." The color drained from his face. Who are you?" "I am Richard Blackwood's daughter," I said slowly and clearly, enunciating every word. "The legal, the only, the daughter of Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood." He didn't hesitate any longer. He immediately sent the 2 falsified documents, hidden under layers of encryption, to my email. When I received the confirmation email that the files had arrived, I couldn't help but smile. This life, I am no longer the obedient girl. Nor am I the fool. I will use every rule they taught me to pin them one by one to the very board they created. The day I return, I'll make sure Richard Blackwood, Sophia Vance, and her precious little prince and princess know. I am not some useless pawn they've hidden away in Switzerland. I am the hunter they inadvertently raised with their own hands. The days in Switzerland flew by. I was like a greedy sponge, frantically absorbing any knowledge that could make me stronger. In addition to the top-tier academic courses at Rosie, I used the convenience of my trust fund to hire the best private tutors in my capacity as Blackwood's eldest daughter, studying finance, law, and business management. I had to admit, on the surface, Sophia took meticulous care of me. I stayed in a guest room she had impeccably prepared. The curtains were my favorite off-white, fresh flowers, and a daily study schedule always sat on my desk. The kitchen fridge was stocked with organic ingredients, and her driver would be waiting at the school gate right on time every day after class. She was like a perfect, dutiful guardian. She was also extremely supportive and cooperative regarding my study of what seemed to be advanced subjects. She had to cooperate because according to the script of my past life, a capable but naive and foolish big sister Clara would ultimately become nothing more than a stepping stone for her son Leo on his path to success. She never showed me any displeasure. In fact, she often praised me in an admiring tone for being independent, intelligent, and well-mannered. She would also frequently introduce me in her social circles, saying, "This is Richard's daughter, the future successor of the company." Sometimes I even had to admire her masterful acting. Even more natural than Sophia's performance were the twins. They had come to see me as the one and only big sister in their lives. Every night, Lily wouldn't sleep until I finished telling her a bedtime story. Before bed, Leo insisted I help him arrange his precious robot models perfectly and liked for me to carry him to brush his teeth. Their dependence on me was like a vine wrapping around a great tree, cautious, yet clinging with all its might. But I knew this dependence wasn't born of pure love. It was only because they were still so young. They didn't know who I was or that we weren't a real family. They had no idea that as they grew older, their mother Sophia would personally strip me of this sister title piece by piece, until she had ground me into the dust. But for now I was in no hurry. The more they loved me, the more it would hurt them later. I drew with them, played the piano, read English picture books, and played role-playing games. In their little world I was the best, kindest, most perfect sister. Sister Clara, they called me with pride. At preschool they would even argue with other kids over me, declaring in their sweet childish voices, "My sister is the prettiest in the world and she'll protect me." I would always smile and gently pat their heads. "Of course. Sister will protect you for your whole lives." I wasn't lying. I would protect them, until they found out how their mother had protected mine. One weekend evening, I was curled up on the sofa working on a financial analysis assignment, when a CNBC business interview program came on the living room TV. A familiar corporate logo flashed across the screen, and the host said enthusiastically, "Tonight, we are deeply honored to have with us the chairman of the Blackwood Group, Mr. Richard Blackwood. Welcome." The camera zoomed in. My father was there in his usual tailored Armani suit, sitting before the camera with a gentle smile and a poised demeanor. I stared at that face for a good 10 seconds. It was so familiar it reminded me of when I was little, watching Sesame Street in the living room, and he would stroke my head just like that and say in a hopeful tone, "My Clara, you have to go to Harvard one day." The host asked with a smile, "Mr. Blackwood, we all know you have a happy and beautiful family, with one daughter, Miss Clara. We hear she's currently studying at a top university in Europe." My father nodded, his smile unwavering. "Yes, I only have one child." The host joked. "Wow, with such a vast business empire and family fortune, Miss Clara must be under a lot of pressure to take it all on by herself." For a split second my father's movements paused, and his smile became a little unnatural. Yes, but I'm confident she can handle it." I sat up straight, staring at the familiar face on the screen, the corners of my mouth curling into a cold arc. This was Richard Blackwood. In front of the camera he was always the flawless entrepreneur and father, never missing a beat. But I saw it. Deep in his eyes a flicker of hesitation, a hint of guilt, the kind of subconscious evasion and concealment that only I could understand. It wasn't that he couldn't bear for me to take on the heavy burden alone. It was that he was dying to announce to the world, "No, you're all wrong. I also have a son. My true heir is not her." I turned off the TV and sat in the darkness for a long time, until my phone screen lit up with an encrypted email notification from the U.S. The Blackwood Group's quarterly online board meeting is about to begin. The agenda includes discussion of the next round of overseas mergers and acquisitions. I clicked into the live stream and entered the hidden access password I had prepared long ago. On the screen appeared complex contracts, performance-based clauses, cash flow reports, and pages of statements from the group's executives. I glanced at the list of executives, and the corner of my mouth lifted again. Sophia Vance's name was right there. Her title had been quietly upgraded from Vice President of European Operations to Global Strategic Executive Advisor, making her a core member of the overseas M&A team. Everything was exactly the same as in my past life. She was climbing the ladder step by step, all while placating me in Europe, playing the role of my savior flawlessly. And on my end, just as methodically, I pressed the screen record button, saving all the meeting minutes, audio, and video to my private cloud drive. This included the internal employee performance review she submitted last time, the one she personally signed, recommending that the voting rights for the group shares held in trust for my mother, Eleanor, as part of the marriage agreement, be temporarily classified as a legacy issue, to be dealt with after the board's restructuring. I smiled. She was acting. And so was I. Except we were no longer following the same script. She thought I was a horse with a bridle on, that I would walk obediently wherever she led. But she didn't know I was just waiting for her to run faster and faster, to get drunk on her own success, so I could send her and her whole carriage crashing to the ground with a single kick. At 2 a.m, I sat at my desk, the glow of the lamp illuminating my laptop, where complex diagrams of personal relationships and timelines filled the screen. At the end of the document, I typed a final line. Clara Blackwood, age 17, sole legal heir to the Blackwood Group. Assets, preparing for reclamation. 4 years. Not so long but not so short either. The sunsets in Geneva were still golden, like melted honey, but I knew it was time to go. On the day of my university graduation, I didn't invite my father, Richard. Only my mother, Eleanor. She flew in from Zurich, wearing a long navy blue velvet dress. Her complexion was so much better than it had been 4 years ago. The fine lines around her eyes seemed to have faded, and her brow was no longer perpetually furrowed. She stood at a distance from the crowd, watching me take off my mortarboard. She was smiling, but she secretly dabbed at the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief. I walked over to her. She grasped my hand, her voice trembling slightly. Clara, my darling, look at you. You've gotten thin again. I smiled and squeezed her hand back. I'm fine, Mom. I've already started getting involved in some company business. I'll probably be even busier once I'm back in New York. Madam, you can rest assured. The young miss is quite formidable now. Over these years, even I have come to admire her self-discipline and perseverance. The one who drove to pick us up was Sophia. She sat in the passenger seat, a proper smile on her face, her tone as breezy and unthreatening as a perfect assistant's. My mother simply nodded at her, her voice polite but distant. You've had your hands full these past few years. Oh, don't say that. Clara is like a second daughter to me. When Sophia said that, I clearly saw an almost imperceptible flicker in my mother's eyes, and her hand on mine instinctively tightened. I knew she understood everything. She was just still waiting for a repentance that would never come. But I didn't give her the chance to reminisce. I knew that once she started, she'd be trapped again by the weight of the past. The night before I left for New York, the 2 children knocked quietly on my door. Sister. It was Lily. She was 9 now, blossoming into a little princess in her pink bunny pajamas, her eyes red-rimmed. Behind her stood Leo in a blue Superman t-shirt, clutching his favorite Transformers figure. What are you 2 doing here? I feigned a bit of surprise and led them into the room. Are you really going back to America? The little girl threw her arms around my waist, her voice thick with tears. You promised you'd be here to watch me grow up. You're a liar, Leo pouted, trying to act like a little man, but his reddened eyes gave him away. Dad didn't even say you were leaving. I'm going back for work. It's not like I'm never coming back, I said, gently stroking their heads. Then can you video call us every day? And say goodnight to us every day? Lily looked up, her big grape-like eyes wide as tears streamed down her cheeks. I hugged her gently. My heart didn't stir, but my lips formed the gentlest words. Of course I can. Sister will miss you every day. They were still so young. Clean, clingy, and so innocent it was almost endearing. For a moment, I nearly forgot they were Sophia's backup plan to usurp the Blackwood family. The next day at the airport, Sophia gave me a big hug in the parking lot. Clara, once your father gets his current work sorted out, it'll be time to seriously consider you joining the group. You are, after all, his only daughter. I nodded obediently like a well-behaved marionette. I'll wait for his arrangements. Those 2 little ones are heartbroken that you're leaving. She sighed, performing the part of a doting, reluctant mother. They really can't bear to part with their big sister. Miss Vance. I cut her off. I looked up, my eyes sincere. They need me. But New York needs me too. She paused for a moment then smiled. All right then. The choice is yours. I picked up my suitcase and took a step out of the airport doors. The New York sky was just beginning to pale with the light of dawn. I knew this was the first step of my return, and the first shot in a war that was now officially declared. I was no longer the Blackwood's exiled, obedient daughter, nor was I the guest living under Sophia's roof. I am Clara Blackwood, Eleanor's daughter. The true heir returned to take back what is mine. The first thing I did upon my return was pull the organizational charts for the Blackwood Group from the past 5 years and meticulously analyze the promotion logic and factional loyalties of every single executive. The second thing I did was submit an anonymous resume through an external headhunting firm, applying under a pseudonym for a position at the Blackwood Group's most promising tech subsidiary. No one knew who I was. The interviewers only knew that I had a stellar resume, solid experience, and a polished demeanor, a rare talent. I had no interest in the cushy position my father would arrange for me. I would start at the weakest link in his chain of command and bit by bit tear his empire down from the foundations. Because I knew better than anyone that the one who would truly inherit the Blackwood kingdom would never be the princess sitting in her castle, waiting for fate to hand her a crown. As the plane cut through the sky, images flashed in my mind. My mother at my graduation, her warnings choked back with tears, the dependence in the eyes of Sophia's twins, and the recording of that financial news interview, where Richard Blackwood stated to the world unequivocally, "Yes, I have only one daughter." I let out a soft laugh. That's right. Just one. And this time, I would make him pay the steepest price for failing to cherish his one and only. In time, the media would use their most flowery prose to consecrate the return of this one and only. And all of it would be part of the trap I was setting for him myself. I was 20 the year I returned to the States. Richard Blackwood himself came to pick me up at JFK, just as he had when he sent me abroad, impeccably dressed in a suit, a genial smile on his face. Standing behind him were several senior executives from the company. Even through my sunglasses, I could clearly tell who were his newly promoted confidants and which of the old guard were ready to knock me, the heir-dropped eldest daughter, down a peg. "Clara, you're finally back," he said, his tone carrying a perfectly measured note of relief. "Yes," I replied with a smile. "Father." He patted my shoulder in satisfaction. "Don't worry, the company has already arranged a position for you. You'll start with a rotation in the Overseas Investment Department. Put your head down and work hard. There will always be a place for you in the company." I nodded, then said in an all-business tone, "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood." He visibly froze, and for a split second, the smile on his face faltered. I knew he got the message. The man I once called father had been buried by my own 2 hands in his study back when I was 15. But he still needed me to be his eldest daughter, the public face of family harmony, and needed me to placate the few board members who still held a soft spot for my mother. And so I returned without making a sound. My first year I did grunt work in the investment department, market research, analysis reports, pulling all-nighters for projects. I never once put on the airs of a pampered heiress. My colleagues found me humble, capable, and well-mannered. Gradually, people began to genuinely accept me, even like me. My second year, I was transferred to the CEO's office as a project coordinator. I was at Richard's side for every important business function. In meetings, I took the minutes. Afterward, I prepared his detailed debriefings. Discreetly, I committed the company's entire power structure and web of connections to memory. He began to truly trust me. In my third year, my mother, Eleanor, finally moved out of the Blackwood family estate for good. She settled into a house on Long Island that I'd bought for her with my trust fund. She grew quiet and composed, letting go of the past completely, as if she'd been reborn. But only I knew that whenever she saw photos in the news of Richard and Sophia at a charity gala, she would subconsciously press her lips into a thin line, her fingertips trembling slightly. "I'm fine," she would always tell me on the phone. "Don't worry about me." I would nod. "I'm not worried. I just remember everything." That winter, Sophia returned to New York with her 11-year-old twins, under the pretext that the children needed a better Mandarin education. They were enrolled in the top international school in the city. I prepared lavish gifts in advance and drove to their Upper East Side apartment myself to visit them. Sister. The two children chirped like happy little birds and threw themselves into my arms. The resemblance to Richard around their eyes was already striking. Have you two been good? Did you miss me? I asked, crouching down with a smile and handing them the limited edition toys I had carefully selected. We missed you. Your perfume smells so good. I told my teacher that when I grow up, I want to be amazing just like you. Sophia stood to the side, a gentle smile on her face. Look how attached they are to you. I smiled back. They're smart kids. I reached out and gently stroked their hair, but the warmth in my gaze was turning to ice. They were still young. They didn't understand the weight they carried, but I did. When I got back to my apartment that day, I called my mother. Mom, let me get you 2 new bodyguards. Things in New York have been a little tense lately. Are you afraid something will happen to me, or are you afraid I'll do something? She asked softly. Neither, I said after a pause, my voice calm and firm. I'm afraid you'll steal my scene. The line was silent for a moment, then came a faint laugh. Clara, you've really grown up. In the 6 years since my return, I went from an anonymous rotational hire to a department head's assistant, then to the deputy manager of a major project, and finally to secretary to the board of directors. Step by step, like the most patient of hunters, I seized every opportunity to climb higher. Just before the company's next election for the chairman, I became the youngest member of the executive secretariat. All documents destined for Richard's desk and all high-level meetings on his schedule had to pass through my hands first. I knew Richard was wary of me, but he was too busy. Busy pushing the Blackwood Group's market cap toward $100 billion. Busy paving the road for Sophia and her son Leo. He was so busy he forgot when I, the pawn he had personally exiled, had begun to silently infiltrate his inner sanctum. I hadn't made a sound, but every faction within the company, every ambitious person, knew that Richard Blackwood had only one legitimate daughter, me. At the same time, praise for Mr. Blackwood in the financial press, both at home and abroad, reached a fever pitch. He was lauded as a model self-made entrepreneur. Frugal, a devoted family man with only one daughter. Trapped by this reputation I had so carefully crafted, he wouldn't dare show off his equally outstanding illegitimate son in public, even if he wanted to. And all of it was a cage I had personally built for him, a cage forged from praise. On my 28th birthday, Richard Blackwood collapsed without warning. Payback. It came sooner and more dramatically than I'd ever imagined. Acute angina, striking just 10 minutes before a board presentation that would decide the corporation's next 5-year plan. He was carried out of the conference room on a stretcher and taken straight to the ICU. The media reported he'd worked himself to the bone for the corporation, but the moment he was wheeled into the operating room, the board began its next power shuffle. When I arrived at the hospital with my legal team in briefcases, Sophia was already standing guard outside the room. Her exquisitely made-up face was etched with exhaustion. "You're the person your father trusts most," she said when she saw me, her eyes red-rimmed. "The board is a ship without a captain right now. The corporation can't fall into chaos." I smiled and handed her a folder. "Miss Sophia, I've brought a plan to stabilize the corporation." She took it hesitantly, opened it, and began turning the pages. The first page was a motion of authorization from an emergency board meeting, already bearing the wet ink signatures of 7 core directors. Only hers was missing. The second was a proposal for an emergency restructuring of the corporation's current shareholding. The third was a copy of an anonymous tip. The letter alleged that during his marriage, Chairman Richard Blackwood had misappropriated a total of $260 million in corporate funds to purchase overseas real estate and establish trusts for a certain female executive and her children, constituting a major financial violation and conflict of interest. Sophia's fingers trembled. "Clara, you..." She snapped her head up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What in the world are you trying to do?" My smile didn't waver, but my voice was ice. "You said it yourself. I am the only daughter of the Blackwood family. And now, I'm simply coming back to take what my father left me." "You're betraying your own father?" "I'm not the one who betrayed him. He's the one who sold my mother and me out 13 years ago." My voice was quiet but sharp as a razor. I'm just taking hold of the knife he handed me. Sophia shot to her feet, her face ashen. You won't get away with this. When your father wakes up, he'll stop you. He's already signed a testamentary memorandum, I said, calmly pulling another document from my bag. With his own signature. It includes custody arrangements for your 2 children, and the emergency transitional authorization for the chairmanship. She froze as if struck by lightning. How could you possibly have that document? Because I was the one who talked it over with him before he went into surgery. You're lying. Miss Sophia, I laughed softly. Have you forgotten? I was by his side for 10 whole years. You were only with him for his 3 years abroad. Sophia stood utterly still. She finally realized. All this time she thought I was waiting for the corporation's approval, waiting for Richard to finally relent. But in truth I was waiting for this moment. For her children to be old enough to understand how their mother lost everything overnight. The emergency board meeting convened as scheduled. I stood in the center of the conference room, flanked by my legal team and audit representatives from a Big Four accounting firm. When I announced that, per the board's emergency motion and the chairman's own transitional authorization, I would be assuming the role of acting chairwoman of the Blackwood Corporation, Sophia's seat was empty. Richard was still in the ICU. And her twins had already been picked up by my legal team. From now on, their lives would be managed by a separate trust fund, far removed from the corporation's operations. Someone raised an objection. She's just his daughter. The chairman isn't dead yet. But I silenced the entire room with a single sentence. I am Clara Blackwood, Richard Blackwood's sole legal heir. For the past 10 years, I have been deeply involved in every major project proposal, every round of financial statement approvals, and every critical bidding conference this corporation has undertaken. Today, I am merely following legal procedure. No one else dared to speak. Richard did eventually wake up. He had lost a great deal of weight. Lying in the hospital bed, he looked at me standing before him and asked in a hoarse voice, When did all this start? It started the day you told me, go to Switzerland or take the 20 million. He stared, his cloudy eyes seeming to recall that distant afternoon, the moment I calmly signed my name and walked away. You don't hate me, he asked. I did. But there's no time for hate anymore, I said. Richard, you raised a wolf with your own 2 hands. You have to admit you were the one who opened the door for her. He closed his eyes, his trembling fingers reaching for the call button on the headboard. But I had already turned and walked out of the room. The moment I shut the door, I finally heard it. A low, desperate cry, aged by despair. Clara! I didn't look back. That winter, when the Blackwood Corporation released its New Year's message, the chairman's portrait on the official company homepage was updated for the first time. It was the face of a calm young woman, her eyes clear yet edged with sharpness. Her name was Clara Blackwood. It had taken her 13 years to transform from a pitiful girl exiled by her family into the true master of the Blackwood Empire. She never won back her father's love, but she had protected her mother's last shred of dignity. And for herself she had won the entire world. Standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows on the top floor of the corporation's headquarters, I looked out over the Manhattan skyline and answered a video call from Switzerland. On the screen were the twins, now 12 years old. Sister, Mom has been crying all by herself lately. She said you don't want us anymore. I paused for a moment, then answered in a voice softer than I had ever used before. Don't worry. Your sister is always here for you.